How would you respond if someone told you that your home or your church will be destroyed soon? That's a terrifying message, we could say. And today we read about Jesus, who is accompanied by people entering Jerusalem, and people show him the temple. At that time, the Jewish temple is in full splendor because Herod, the king of Judea, restored it for the Jews to gain their support and sympathy. This was the son of the Herod who wanted to kill baby Jesus. And Jews are proud of this. This is the second temple, absolutely beautiful, very well equipped, and a lot of gold and other precious materials are there. And they are proud of it. And Jesus says, do not put your trust in earthly buildings. Look, sometimes we travel to different countries or our own country. We see different cities and we admire beautiful skyscrapers or other products of human genius and technology, and we take pride in it. But Jesus says, do not be confident in those earthly buildings, human technology, because this all will be destroyed, will pass away at some point. And Jesus' words were actually fulfilled pretty soon. He said those things about year 30. In the year 70, Roman army invaded Jerusalem in response to the insurrection of Jews who wanted to become independent. Romans invaded and completely ruined Jerusalem, including the temple, and there was no stone upon stone. And when we go there for a trip to the Holy Land, actually we do not see, probably nothing actually is from Jesus' times, or very few buildings. What we see there is much later, and we can see just the foundation of the temple. It has never been rebuilt since then. But the message of Jesus is universal. It does not refer only to that historical event from about 2,000 years ago. Jesus speaks about the end of the world, the ultimate end of the world. So he encourages us to think about the end. We tend to focus on little things in our life. Maybe we plan ahead of time, maybe one day ahead, or maybe a few hours. We think what we're going to do after this Mass, what we will have for dinner. Maybe tomorrow some of us will go to work. Maybe we think about someone's birthday or Thanksgiving dinner with friends and family. But all those things are very little, very small compared to the main goal of our life, which is salvation in heaven. And Jesus comes today and says, raise up your eyes, think broader. Think about something that you normally do not think about. The end of the world. People who listened to Jesus were also curious. When they heard him speaking about the end of the world, they reacted as normal people would react, asking him, tell us when it's going to happen. And Jesus says, no one knows. You cannot know it. But he gives us signs. He says how to recognize the end of the world coming. And there were many people over these 2 millennia since Jesus who predicted the end of the world. All of them were mistaken. We know from historical record chronicles that people expected the end of the world on the year 1000, and another expectation was in a year 1666, and then some thought that maybe in the year 2000 the world will finish, and many sectarian groups and some self-called prophets also thought that the end of the world is coming, and Jehovah's Witnesses predicted at least 3 times mistakenly the end of the world throughout the 20th century. All of them were mistaken because only God knows. But Jesus also gives us a universal message that is valid in all times, which is that there will be suffering, there will be persecutions, there will be famine and earthquakes, and all those things we experience here and there throughout the history. They will be probably more intense at the last time, but we still experience them, and the persecutions. So it's good to think of Jesus' promise. Be confident. Do not be afraid. Not a hair on your head will be destroyed. If you can't accomplish something by yourself, trust in Jesus. He will help you. He is always with you. And if your faith is not endangered directly by someone, you still can give testimony to Christ. We live in the country of religious freedom, after all, and Western culture generally is promoting religious freedom, even if there are some, maybe obstacles here and there. But it's quite rare that someone will stop you on the street, pull out a gun, and say, either you will deny Christ or I will kill you. And these kind of situations happen here and there, but they are still rare. And we can come here to this church and pray, and that's a huge blessing for us. But also, this situation is a challenge for us, because we may lose our Christian identity easily when we are not challenged. The early church, the primitive church, the church of the apostles, was this very small group of Christians, and they were persecuted pretty much by everybody. And they had to spread the gospel throughout the world, and they had to challenge the common culture, the pagan culture, and they had to transform it. And in those persecutions, they were very faithful to Christ. And now we are tempted to lose identity, and we have to put more effort into remain Christians and Catholics. And the question is how to do this. The martyrdom of blood is a very clear testimony of faith. As I said, very few of us would have, or maybe none of us will have the occasion to testify to Christ with his own blood. But there is something which is called white martyrdom. The martyrdom which is not bloody, but also requires sacrifice, which means to choose God every day, and to do it even against mainstream culture, against secularism of our times, relativism. We come here, and even by this Eucharist, we already give testimony that we care, that we know that God is there, and that we want to build relationship with Him. We believe that He is present in the church. We believe that He is present in the sacraments, and we give sign to the world that there is hope, that there is God, and there is presence of God, and we can reach out to Him. So this may happen through the Eucharist, but it's also daily prayer. It's also in your family. How you treat your children, your wife, your husband, your parents, how you act at work, at school, at the shopping mall. Everywhere you are a Christian, and you can testify to Christ. Today, Jesus encourages us to think about ultimate things like the end of the world, And probably we should also think about our private end, the end of our life. Raise our eyes beyond those little things that happen every day and think, are those little things taking me closer to my ultimate destination, which is happiness with God in heaven? Is my life ordered towards salvation? If I build up all those little choices, everyday choices, will they add up to my salvation? Am I heading towards God unreservedly, or maybe I place some obstacles between me and Him? If there are any obstacles, I need to remove them and to look at this final goal, salvation in heaven. Since we are coming here to celebrate especially divine mercy, a few words about our celebration and the mercy prayer. You see, when the world is so, we could say, immersed in sin and all these horrible things that happened in the 20th century, both wars, the First World War, the Second World War, these all hit people and societies and created so much pain and suffering, and literally hundreds of millions of people were killed by communism throughout the decades and by Nazism. And Jesus comes right before, the day before the Second World War. That was the most horrible thing that happened on this planet since the beginning. And he chooses this girl who was born somewhere in central Poland, in a place that nobody knows of, and completely, we could say, insignificant person at insignificant place. I don't know if you are aware, her last name, Kowalska, which for male would be Kowalski, the most common Polish last name. It comes from Kowal. Kowal is the same as smith or blacksmith in English. So it's a name like Smith in English. So it's a very common name. Even her last name is like something showing that she is not any particular person. There is no merits on her side. You can't even think of a person less significant than her. Yet, she becomes the apostle of divine mercy because God chose her to be. And what grace, what choice, what we could say appreciation on God's side. And she dies in a very early age, right before the war. So her life was pretty much hidden. She didn't accomplish anything spectacular. She didn't write any theological masterpieces. Of course, her diary is a masterpiece, but not because of knowledge or her studies, but because Jesus himself is talking to her. So such an insignificant person becomes very important for our times. Jesus, through her, tells all of us, there is mercy, there is hope. Even though there is so much suffering and so much pain and blood in this world, come to me. Turn your hearts to me. Here, in my heart, you will find hope and you will find consolation. And now, of course, some people will follow this way, some not. What to do, but this message is very powerful, and we see divine logic or pedagogy in this. How God guides His chosen people, how God guides church throughout the ages. That at these times of such a big advancement of our technology, of our abilities, where we take so much pride in what we have, at the same time Jesus says, you need mercy, and gives us hope, because there is so much insecurity in our times. And he says that there is hope. So, of course, our call and task is to propagate and speak about divine mercy. And when Faustina was around, and when she tried to popularize the message about Jesus' revelations, and Father Sopoćko, her spiritual director, they encountered the question, why? What is so new about it? Why would you even try to make it something common? It's obvious that God is merciful. And everybody knows it has been always in the church history and church teaching, and there is already some devotion to divine mercy and so on. But in fact, the times of negligence and abandoning faith require more mercy. As St. Paul says, where there is more sin, there is the grace pours upon people more abundantly. And that's why our times with all the sin and secularism and even disregard to God and holy things require more of divine mercy, require more saying that God is good, that God is merciful to everybody, that God forgives sins and encourages everybody to join Him, to come closer to Him. So let us never cease to propagate this message, and most of all, live this message in our lives.